Welcome, everybody, to episode 10 of Black and Gold Weekly. As you can see, I am joined by very, very special guests here today. Ready to go, talk a lot of Bruins hockey. They had a big, big week this past week. This is Leon Lifschutz from blackandgoldhockey.com and also the Bruins Breakdown podcast. Absolutely, man. It's awesome to have you here. Man, you do a lot of work here at Black and Gold Productions. One of my teammates at BNG does writing as well as the Bruins Breakdown show. So, Leon, thank you so much for coming on today. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, man. It's we got some sun up here in Vermont. That doesn't mean it's warm, but that means it's still hockey season. So I'm psyched for that. It wasn't our normal start to the hockey season this fall, either personally or following professional hockey. So it's been a treat to just be diving right into both right now, and I'm pretty psyched. And thanks for having me. We had a great time having you a few weeks back, and I'm hopeful I can be as good on your show as you were on ours.
Well, I'm sure you will be. This is going to be a fun episode, everybody. Lots to talk about with the Bruins this past week. Before we get into it, I just want to thank everyone, Mark Allred and the entire team at Black and Gold Productions. They are the reason that this show exists. I would not be here without them. So a huge shout out to everybody at BNG Productions. And also, I, of course, want to point out the links down in the description of the video. We have 3 Fanatics links for Bruins apparel, which is the top one, NHL apparel, which is the middle one, and NCAA college apparel, which is the last one. It would really, really help out Black and Gold Productions a lot. If you guys are in the market for any of that stuff, if you would check those links out and take a look. They've got hats, shirts, jerseys, sweatpants, accessories, all kinds of different stuff, whatever you need. Anything NHL Bruins, anything NHL, and anything NCAA college, it is all there. So would really appreciate if you check that out. But let's get into things here. Looking at the past week for the Boston Bruins, and we'll start by reviewing their last few games since we last had an episode. Did not start out too well last Thursday and Friday, Leon. They got embarrassed on back-to-back nights, once by the Islanders and then once by the Rangers. I guess we'll go back to the first one, the Islanders game. Just any thoughts on that? Pretty much a third period implosion.
Yeah, I think third period implosion, say that 5 times fast, third period implosion. It sums it up pretty good. The first 2 periods were a great game between two good hockey teams, 2 teams you could see meeting in the division final. Just they play playoff hockey, and they were playing their style right off the bat. I really enjoyed the game, but suddenly in the third, I think we had that sort of big guffaw there by Frederick, and the team sort of put their head down after that, and that was kind of the end of it. So that was kind of too bad to see. They had been so relentless in playing a full 60 minutes earlier in the season with all the comebacks, and to see them sort of pack it in. Even their coach sort of admitted they packed it in a little bit there. Was a little bit disheartening, but for 2 periods, it was a great hockey game between two very good hockey teams, and it was a bad, not even 20 minutes, it was a bad 14 minutes or so, but that's more than enough to be embarrassed in the NHL.
Yeah, absolutely. And for whatever reason, man, the Islanders just have the Bruins number, it seems like. Yeah. They cannot beat that team. And I was mostly disappointed by just like you said, they just packed it in, and kind of that give up factor in that third period, which you don't see very often with Bruins teams. I thought that was very out of character for them. But after that gaffe by Frederick in front of the net that led to a goal against, that like the whole team just shut down and was kind of like, all right, well, we're done in this one. And they kind of just gave up, which as a fan, I thought was kind of really disappointing, because you don't see it from this team very often.
No, that was the surprising part. It's a team led by some pretty good veterans. And there were some people trying, and they almost tried too hard. Like McAvoy had a couple critical mistakes there to allow the Islanders to put some distance between them. And those weren't mistakes from lack of trying. They were for sort of trying in the wrong ways a little bit, unfortunately. So you had one group sort of not pushing, the other group pushing too hard, and, 1 or 2 people trying to cross-check people when it wasn't necessary. So you had sort of three different groups pulling different directions, and that doesn't really work. And the end result was a bad loss.
Yeah, definitely. And it certainly didn't work on Thursday because they ended up 7-2 final, getting blown out in that one. And then they had a back-to-back set that the next night they were in New York against the other team from New York, the New York Rangers. And I thought this was a chance for them to bounce back and, kind of make up for that implosion the night before, and they did pretty much the opposite and got embarrassed again by the other New York team now with a 6-2 loss to the Rangers and another just not good game from the Bruins. And I think that was kind of a wake-up call to this team. Maybe they needed, but it was another not great game. Any thoughts on the Friday night game?
Yeah, let's start with your point around the wake-up call. Is it just didn't get teams go through ebbs and flows in a season. It's usually a longer season than this, but even 56 games is a long season. And you're going to have ups and downs, and they had 10 games with a point, and then they went 4 out of 5 where they lost, although I think they picked up points in 2 of the 5, if I'm not mistaken, even 1 of the 5. And that's what happens. But 10 games of points is greater than 5 games of struggling. And so if you can do that throughout the regular season, you'll be a very good team. So as long as it's only 4 out of 5, they had the OT loss yesterday. So they've now lost technically, I think, 5 of the past 7. But, shootout loss is a shootout loss. So as long as that's sort of a little bit of a slump and a little bit of a hiccup and they get back to playing good hockey, I think they're okay. I think the challenge is that Rangers loss, you can sort of stomach a loss, but they had about 10 minutes in the second period where they were good and they're playing Bruins hockey, and the other 50 minutes of the game they were not. So coming off that implosion in the third and then having an effort in the next game that just wasn't great, and maybe the effort level was there, but the cohesion was there. Something was off is the moral of the story. But, if they can they bounce back against, I think you're getting to the next game, they bounced back pretty good that game. And they had a pretty good effort against the Capitals. And so you're like, okay, just a blip on the radar. This happens in a season. So be it. But yeah, you want a little bit better effort than you had in that game. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. But speaking of bouncing back, they did in the Sunday game against the New York Rangers. That was a Sunday afternoon matchup on NBC, national television. And honestly, I think that was one of the better games that the Bruins have played as a whole this year. They really kind of controlled that game from start to finish, and they ended up with a 4-1 win. And I think that was a really good bounce back effort in response to that wake up call after getting blown out twice in a row, Thursday and Friday. And Sunday's game I thought was pretty impressive. And I think the defense really stepped up and played significantly better. Obviously they got some goal scoring from guys who haven't really been scoring a whole lot this year. Coyle and Frederick both got goals in that one. So that was nice to see. And I think Sunday was the kind of game that you want to see the Bruins playing.
Yeah, it really was a template of a Bruins hockey game.
Yep.
It was low event. There wasn't a ton of chances. A struggle they had against the Rangers and Islanders and against the Devils and even Flyers throughout the season is teams with some speed. They sort of allow to get through the middle and to counterattack. And against the Rangers in the second game of that set, they did not. They really stifled them. They shut them down. They took away their speed. They took away their space, especially on the full ice plays. And then once they're set in their zone, no one really defends in their zone better than the Bruins do over the past several years. And so they played that kind of game. And if you sort of look at the numbers, it was a low event game. They sort of waited for their opportunities and then they capitalized on their opportunities. And that's how the Bruins want to play. And that's the identity that they got away from a little bit the last few games. And so if they can get back to that identity, I think they'll sort of be in good shape again. So It was really nice to see them playing their game. Like you said, there was more cohesion amongst the whole defensive unit of 5 players, but also a nice game by some individuals on the back end as well. So that was definitely a positive after sort of Bruins fans and the Bruins verse was sort of cannibalizing itself after a couple of rough ones.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of times as fans, we tend to overreact to when things get bad. And it was not a good couple of games, but it was a really nice bounce back on Sunday. And I think the Bruins showed that they still are a really good hockey team and that there are going to be bumps in the road along the way. And it's not going to be a perfect season, but when they're playing well, the Bruins can really dominate an opponent. And I think they showed that on Sunday against the Rangers. And that brings us now to last night's game against the Washington Capitals, which I thought was just a great hockey game between two very, very good teams. And the
How fun was
Bruins,
watching Ovi in that game?
yeah,
That's why you're a fan and you watch the game for efforts like that. The Bruins didn't play him poorly. He's just that good of a hockey player. And
yeah.
you got your, there was no admission, but you would have gotten your price of admission had there been. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought, it was a low scoring 2-1 game, but I think there was a lot of there was good pace to the game. It was very physical. It felt like a playoff game, honestly. It really had that playoff feel to it. And I think, maybe that will be a bit of a playoff preview to what could potentially happen down the road here in May or June this season, between the Caps and the Bruins. But Boston ends up losing in the shootout. Again, they get a point out of it. It wasn't, obviously kind of stinks not to get the win there because it was a very well played game, but I think it was a well played game by both teams. Both goaltenders, Vanacek and Rask, both had really solid games for each of their teams. And I was just impressed with the overall level of play from both of those teams last night. And I thought it was a solid hockey game that unfortunately the Bruins just came out slightly on the short end of at the end. But overall, there's really nothing to complain about with the overall game there.
Yeah, I had one concern I'll sort of share is I think in the third period, it wasn't their best effort again. After 2 periods of great hockey, really great hockey, even better than the Islanders game, more so their template of hockey than the Islanders game was, which was a little more open than they usually like to play. Really limited some of the stars on Washington. Still had some chances of their own. Pasternak with the double post that doesn't show up as a shot on goal, but it could have been 2. And they really were at their game. And then third, I thought they conceded a little too much to the Capital skilled players. There was a couple times where they allowed Ovechkin some space on the outside, and he drove the net and made some plays. A couple times there was one play in particular where I think it was Jacob Vrana, or no, it was Dmitry Orlov, and he drove down the wing and he beat his guy, and Grzelcyk was in front of the net covering Tom Wilson, and Grzelcyk had to cheat over to Orlov so he couldn't drive the net, and Wilson got a great chance. And those are the kind of chances, those are breakdowns above the play, before the play gets to the net. And those are things I think they have been doing a little bit too much of this year, been giving that up. And in the third, it started creeping back into their game a little. And thankfully, they had Tuukka Rask, what I think was his best effort of the season, to sort of make sure that they got that point. But it was 2 really good teams, and those are skilled players we're talking about who are going to make some plays from time to time. And if you can keep that to a minimum and you get a save or 2 from your really skilled, Vezina finalist goaltender, then that's how it goes some nights. But I agree with you. I think it's starting to it's not quite the halfway point of the season yet, but it's starting to feel like those teams, the 1 through 5 in the East Division, are realizing like, okay, we are 2-game win streak, 3-game win streak away from first place, or a 3-game losing streak to being out of the playoffs by a couple of wins. And you can see them starting to feel that when they're playing each other a little bit, which should make for like a really exciting last 30 plus games of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. You look at the East standings right now, and those top 5 teams are just stacked up, and somebody is going to get left out. Only 4 teams from the division make the playoffs. There's going to be one very disappointed team at the end of the year that is going to unfortunately be left out of the playoffs. And I think a lot of these games when these teams play each other is starting to pick up that intensity and get that almost playoff level feel, because they know that every game is so important, especially with the shortened season now. You don't have time to make up for a bad week like you did in a normal year. If you lose a couple games in a row, you can go from 2 to 5 really quickly. And that, I think, I agree, is going to make for some really exciting hockey the rest of the way that I'm certainly looking forward to.
Yeah, it should give us something to do as hopefully the world slowly gets back to normal. It should keep our attention and keep us out of trouble in the meantime.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to be watching every game that I possibly can. That's for sure. Switching gears.
Lots of them, right?
Yeah.
Doing play-by-play, yeah.
Yeah, I'm doing play-by-play for a lot of them and just watching as much hockey as I can for sure. So past week for the Bruins, not a great record overall, 1-2-1 in their past 4 games, but the last 2 games they have been significantly better after really, really tough couple games against the Islanders and Rangers at the end of last week. So switching gears a little bit here, I want to talk about the defense because we've had a little bit of a shakeup here on the defense. There's been some injuries. Lauzon's out. Grzelcyk was out, but just returned last night. Vaakanainen's ended up being called up into the lineup. Jared Tinordi was picked up on waivers, which I have a theory on to why the Bruins might have done that. But I want to go to you first. Just kind of your thoughts on the defensive shakeup here. And I guess I want to start with Vaakanainen. What have you thought of him so far at the NHL level?
I want to know your theory right now, and hopefully you can hear me over the F-35s flying over my head. We live right near the Air Guard base.
Yeah.
So apologies for that, but I'll talk loud. So, Vaakanainen, I enjoy a lot. He is a subtle player. I don't think he's a player like a lot of fans really love Connor Clifton because Connor Clifton does stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Vaakanainen doesn't necessarily do stuff, but he, I think, is a really, really effective player. I saw that Fluto Shinzawa of The Athletic mention that both he and some of the folks he's talked to within the organization feel that Vaakanainen might have the highest ceiling of the young defensemen. And after watching him, I can see why. His edge work is really good. He's so good at one-on-ones. He sorts out his defensive zone better than most players his age do of his sort of skill set.
Yep.
He makes a very nice first pass, a very calm first pass. He's not necessarily throwing the stretch passes all like Grzelcyk all the time, but a very calm pass, a little bit more effective than a Carlo in terms of advancing the puck. And so he does a lot of things that in the modern NHL game are really helpful, really drive play and success, and in a lot of ways fit into what the Bruins like to do, which is to be stout defenders, to advance the puck pretty quickly, and then make sure you're being not too aggressive, but taking the opportunities when they come for you. So I think that he does those things really well. It's weird to say he's such a good skater because he doesn't have that straightaway speed that some others do. But his edge work, his side-to-side, his lateral mobility makes him able to defend against top players in the NHL without missing too much of a beat, which is impressive. So yeah. I enjoyed watching him. I'm curious where he'll end up fitting this season and in the future. But I think he's got top 4 potential, to say the least, and it's probably sooner rather than later that he'll be a fixture in that group.
Yeah, I agree. I think Vaakanainen has an extremely high ceiling, a lot higher than some of the other defensemen that they have back there. I think he's got really good offensive potential. He's a very solid skater, and he's good with the puck. He's only 22 years old. He's very poised and calm with the puck on his stick. He generally makes smart plays. And I think the Bruins have something there where he is probably going to be a top 4 guy for them on that left side. And I certainly think that he can be. This season, I still have a little bit of concern about his defensive zone play, at least right now. I think he's going to grow into that. But at 22 years old, I still think that's an area that he definitely needs to continue to work on and continue improving. It's going to be interesting to see what they do with him this year because he started in Providence. He got the call up now with Lauzon out, but do they keep him up when Lauzon comes back, or do they send him back to Providence so he's playing more minutes and getting more experience? I think he could be a solid depth piece for the Bruins this year, but if they want him playing, significant minutes, I think they might need to send him back to Providence, at least for the rest of this year. And then next season, you start with him in training camp and he could have a top 4 spot in that lineup, depending on how he progresses. But I definitely think there's a lot of potential there and a lot of upward growth potential for Vaakanainen to become a legitimate top 4 guy in the NHL.
Yeah, I think you hit on a couple of really good points. I think when you're talking about the defensive zone, I think one of the things you're alluding to is sort of his size and strength. And he looks like a thick kid, but he's been pushed around a little. And it's sort of weird, some guys at 22 are men, and other people take a couple more years to really have that man strength. And Chris Kreider has that man strength, and Vaakanainen did not on that one particular play.
Yep.
Vaakanainen didn't play it poorly; he just got out muscled. So that's one thing that, especially an AHL schedule, would allow him to get into the gym a little more than the current NHL schedule does.
Yep.
The other thing that was interesting is Jay Leach, the Providence coach, was quoted as saying this, and Bruce Cassidy echoed it as well, is they almost think he's too calm sometimes, like he's not quite revved up quick enough, and in turn, he doesn't maybe make the impact he's capable of. So not necessarily that he's playing poorly, but you talked a little bit about that ability to impact the game offensively, and a guy who's real calm and cool isn't always quite as ramped up to kind of get going and jump into the play more, which he's capable of. And so I think that might be one thing that if he's in the AHL, he's not worried about matching up against Chris Kreider or Mika Zibanejad, that he could gain more confidence in doing. So when he comes up, he's a little bit more ready. And kind of looking at the future of the Bruins sort of depth chart, he might not need to step into that role next year. He really was there because of injuries. And so he could really gain that confidence on a lower pair and then turn it up. But I think those are things that he could really work on, and I think you pointed them out really well. And so a little more development probably doesn't hurt in that regard. So when he's ready, he's a little, the old Detroit Red Wings model, he's a little over-ripened, and he can jump right in.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think there's a lot of raw potential there and a lot of raw talent. It's just about putting the whole package together before playing a big role at the NHL level. And when you do come up, being ready to take that role on for sure. But obviously he's up right now because of injuries. And Lausanne is going to be out for a little while here. So we'll probably be seeing some more Vaakanainen in the Bruins lineup along the way. But another thing I want to talk about, kind of an interesting move here, and again, I do have a theory on this. Jarred Tinordi, picked up by the Boston Bruins. Big, rugged defensive defenseman, 6'6", 210, 215, around there. Good size to him. Not going to give you really anything offensively. Hasn't been that at any point in his career, but can be a physical guy on the back end. And do you want my theory on this, or do you want to go first?
I do. I just want to point out that he's not a very offensive guy, and he had one of the best chances of any of the defensemen last night.
Yeah.
Although it was in an incredibly Jarred Tinordi fashion on like a flubber puck that just missed. So that would have been so funny. We don't have him here for his offense, and he scores the game-winning goal in his first game. So that's too bad that didn't happen. That would have been a fun story. But I am actually anxious to hear your theory, so I'm gonna
Okay, so I think the Bruins picked up Tinordi because they have bad news on Kevin Miller. Because I think that they are very similar style players. I think Miller is a better player, but Tinordi is here, I think, to kind of replace that toughness and physicality on the back end, because I don't think things are going very well with Kevin Miller's injury. And I've heard a lot that it's the knee again, and he's already had 2 surgeries on that knee. And I'm really getting worried that this could be it for Kevin Miller. And I think that by them bringing in a guy like Tinordi who plays that defensive style and is that big physical guy, I think that probably points to us not seeing Miller very much the rest of the year, or maybe even, hopefully not, but maybe even never again. So that's just my theory on why they would bring in a player like Tinordi.
I like the theory. From what I've read, he's been working out off the ice a little bit, but they've been afraid to get him back on the ice yet.
Yeah.
So if nothing else, they're being incredibly cautious. And if they're being that cautious, I think you're right. It makes you concerned about the long-term health. And it definitely seems like it's the knee, which has been literally a sore spot for him.
Yes.
It would be a shame because he really showed he's still capable of being an NHL defenseman and contributing. And he started off slow, but who wouldn't after 2 years of not being in NHL game action, and then really started to carve that role out for himself that he had several years ago again. And that would be a shame, but I could see that being the case, and then at the very least wanting Tinordi as an insurance policy.
Yep.
And he slides down onto your taxi squad really easily if Miller comes back, or even if they decide that, they'd like to stick with, Vaakanainen up in that number 7 spot when everyone's healthy again, other than Miller, or I guess number 6 spot. And then, so he's a guy, he seems to know his role too.
Mm-hmm.
He seems to understand who he is as a 29-year-old sort of tweener. He wore a letter in Milwaukee last year, even though he managed to play, I think 30 or so games with Nashville. And so if he's a guy who understands that and can play that role, that would be great. And to your point as well, that might also give them some insulation to let a guy like Vaakanainen play a little more in the minors if they still go that way. And but it was so interesting to hear Cassidy's comments sort of like pumping his tires saying that we might put him on the top pair with Charlie McAvoy. He's got that ruggedness we want. I was like, whoa, Bruce, where are you going with this, buddy? But it seems like maybe he was just trying to, we'll see what happens, but trying to give a guy who's coming here, some good press, and kudos to him for doing that. But I hope that I hope that's all it was.
Yeah, no, I definitely think you're going to see Tinordi as a bottom pair guy and a depth piece, but I think he can be a solid depth piece. I think, right now they have some injuries, so he got into the lineup last night. I think in a normal situation, he's probably your number 7 or on the taxi squad, but he's a depth addition to that blue line with some veteran experience and some physicality that they're certainly going to be missing with Miller out of the lineup. So,
right. And Lausanne as well.
In Lausanne as well, too, kind of plays with that chip on his shoulder. So
makes your toughest defenseman right now, Connor Clifton.
Yeah, really. And I think Tinordi was a solid depth pickup. And some people were kind of like making fun of the move, but I think in this situation, you can never have too much depth, especially on the back end. And for a low cost move like this, I don't really see why it would be worth making fun of. Like, it's just another depth piece here. And an insurance policy, like you said, if Miller's not able to come back, they have another guy with that similar style of play who can take over that role as well.
Yeah, now if you have injuries or issues, you now have more Kampfer and Tinordi all to turn to. All of whom are capable of being a number 6 defenseman just fine. You're not terrified about inserting them into the lineup. And there was a point in time just last week where Moore was like your number 3 defenseman because of all the injuries. Number 4 must be. So you may need to go down that route, especially don't forget how condensed their schedule is about to get even more than it already was. So in that sense, it's probably not a bad idea to have a guy who seems reliable and seems like a good guy, especially when you can utilize the taxi squad with him.
Yeah, absolutely. Agree 100%. And there was one more thing about the defense I wanted to talk about. This is something that's been talked about for a couple of weeks now in trade rumors involving the Bruins. Now, I have no idea if they would actually go out and pull the trigger on a move like this, but the name Mattias Ekholm has come up with regards to the Boston Bruins because he's a longtime veteran of the league. He's been in the NHL. He's had some very, very good seasons at the NHL level with the Nashville Predators. The Preds, not very good this year, probably not going to the playoffs. So you would think that they would be sellers trying to move some contracts at the deadline. And Boston has come up as a potential trade destination for Mattias Ekholm. Now, Ekholm has kind of declined a little bit over the past year and a half or so. He hasn't been the same player that he was, certainly when the Preds were in the finals back in 2017, where he was a legitimate shutdown defensive defenseman. He hasn't been that as well recently, but some of that could be the Predators not being as good as they've been in recent history, where they've kind of taken a slid the past couple of years. So Mattias Ekholm potentially to the Boston Bruins, is that something that you would even consider, or is that something you would want the Bruins to kind of look into a little bit?
Yeah, my opinion before the season, and as much as I've been impressed with how the complement of younger defensemen have performed, I think they've been really admirable and to some degree exceeded expectations, kind of not where you thought maybe they could be potentially, but to get there as quickly as they have, I really applaud them. And I really give the coaching staff and the management credit for identifying that they were better than we as fans thought they were, which of course is their job and why they're paid to do it, why we're not.
Yes.
Having said that, my opinion hasn't really changed. I think the one thing really missing, not to be a good team, but to be an elite Stanley Cup contender, is one more really good top 4 defenseman. Ideally, someone to play with McAvoy. That person doesn't need to be a traditional number 2, but someone who's in your top 4 who can complement him. The Carlo Grzelcyk pair seems pretty good, although I would make the argument sometimes that on a Stanley Cup contender, Carlo's more of a number 5 than a number 4, but that's kind of nitpicking a little bit. So I think that really is the one thing that's holding them back. People talk about their secondary scoring as a major hole. I'm not as concerned about it given how the Bruins like to play. But having that one more really stout defending, puck moving, top four defenseman, I think is their one thing that could potentially hold them back come crunch time. So I
Yeah,
would like something like that.
I have to agree. I mean, I've loved the way that the kids have played this year. I think the Bruins D, in my opinion, they've exceeded what I thought they were going to do this season. They've played really, really well. But I think when you get in, they're going to be fine in the regular season. But when you get into the playoffs, particularly deep into the playoffs, and you start playing the absolute best of the best, I do think Boston could use another top four guy. And I think Ekholm could be a guy that you could play up there with McAvoy and kind of complement McAvoy really well. And then if you want to pair him with Carlo on the penalty kill, those are two like shutdown defensive guys that you could have anchoring your PK as well if you want to shake it up a little bit. But he's had a very good career, and this is a phone call that I think you're at least in the conversation on if you're Don Sweeney here. Obviously, cost and what Nashville's looking for in return would obviously play into whether or not you do the deal. But I think you at least have to be on the phone and at least inquiring about it if you're Don Sweeney, because in my opinion, for the Bruins, being a playoff team is great, but it's not good enough. If you're the Boston Bruins, you're trying to win the Stanley Cup. That is your goal this year. And I think they come to beat a team deep in the playoffs, like if they're going to have to play a team like Tampa Bay or a team like Colorado or Vegas or, Toronto, I think we would beat. But other teams, I think there are tough matchups potentially as we get deeper and deeper into the playoffs. Even coming out of your own division, I think Washington or the Islanders would be very difficult playoff series that would probably go full 7 games or somewhere close to that. I think to be a legitimate cup threat and to go deep into the playoffs, I think they need another veteran top 4 guy added to this group. And I think Ekholm would be a really solid addition. And I think you at least have to take the phone call there and see what the deal would look like.
Yeah, they really need a matchup guy real badly, and this past week has been proof of that. Mm-hmm. So granted, Lauzon's been out, and he's been a nice compliment to McAvoy on that top pair when he was healthy. Vaakanainen and Zboril have gotten those assignments the past week, and Vaakanainen was much better against the Rangers, but he even in the second game, in the first game when the team wasn't good, I thought he was better. But against the Islanders, you saw he was sorting things out against the Barzal and those guys, and that hurts McAvoy. McAvoy's numbers were down significantly in that game, even with Vaakanainen bailing him out a couple times on a couple of his adventures. Once you're down a goal, you got to take some of those chances. So not criticizing him for that, but it just didn't work. It was too much to handle. And then Zboril played tremendous in that second Rangers game. Yep. But don't forget they're missing Artemi Panarin, and they're missing that elite talent that he faced in spades the next night. And he played a lot against the top 2 lines, which line number 1 was Ovechkin and Kuznetsov, and line number 2 was Backstrom and Oshie. Mm-hmm. And it did not fare well, fared quite terribly in terms of possession. Yep. Had a hard time on retrievals, and the whole team did. So I'm not criticizing him I'm just saying that that's not enough when you play teams like that. They need somebody who's a little bit more capable. And in turn, it puts the pressure on McAvoy, who is a great, great player, but hockey is a team sport, and especially when you have guys, if teams know they can put it in your corner and hammer you, and they don't need to worry about your partner, they'll do that. And that's what they were doing to McAvoy in the first period, and he couldn't quite get on track after that because of how wisely they played him.
Yes.
So they need someone else where you really need to be on your toes, and they need someone else who can really match up against those guys and take away their time and space and make life hard on them. And that doesn't mean like an overly physical player. It just means a guy who knows how to defend in the NHL and has done so at a high level for a while.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think if you were to add Ekholm to this lineup, you have Ekholm, McAvoy, you keep Grzelcyk and Carlo together. That's a pretty darn good top 4.
Great top 4.
And then you have, so many depth guys that you could work into that bottom pair as well. Bruins defensive depth would look really, really good with an Ekholm added to that top 4 group.
Yeah. if you had a third pair of either Lausanne and Miller or Lausanne and Zboril or Zboril and Miller, any of those three, you have one of the better third pairs in the league.
Absolutely.
And you've got a tremendous first pair. And if Grzelcyk stays healthy, you have a pretty top second pair. No matchup scares you at that point.
Yeah, I completely agree. So overall, I think we both think that the Bruins should at least, be on the phone, at least inquiring about it and see what happens from there. But Ekholm, I think, would be an upgrade to the Boston Bruins defense without a doubt.
Absolutely.
All right, so we're going to switch things up here, and we're going to talk about some good news. The Bruins got some players back from injury last night. David Krejci and Matt Grzelcyk both returned from injury. Unfortunate news, though, Charlie Coyle comes out because he goes on the COVID-19 list. I believe that's the first Bruin to go on the list all season. Which
Carson Kuhlman kind of sort of.
Oh, Kuhlman was. Kuhlman was.
That was like before the season, if we want to split hairs. So
yeah, it was right at the beginning. Kuhlman, in training camp and stuff, was on it, but they haven't had anyone on the list for a long time. Now Coyle ends up on it. One of, I think, only 3 or 4 guys in the league left on the COVID-19 list. So it seems like the NHL is, as things get better in the world in general, knock on wood, the NHL's numbers have gone significantly lower. We're not seeing teams with 19, 20 guys on it like we were a few weeks ago. But Coyle comes out of the lineup. Krejci and Grzelcyk return. And obviously it stinks not to have Coyle in there. But Grzelcyk, I thought in particular, had a very solid game for his first game back and was really, obviously, there was a little bit of rust there, but he was very involved in the play pretty much all night long, which was good to see. He was, effective and had an impact on the game.
Yeah, I think the word effective is really the word I would choose as well. He wasn't quite as engaged in the offensive zone as we're used to, but I think that's just a matter of him feeling it out. And I think his first few shifts were a little bit shaky.
Yep.
But then he made that pass to Pasternak, and that seemed to pick his confidence right back up. And from there, he defended well. I mean, he defended less than any of the other players on his team, on the other defenders on his team. The only defenseman with a positive expected goals total. He was one of the few where you watched and you didn't see him getting buried in his end for long stretches. And that speaks to just, I think, again, the word effective. Yep. He defends well with his feet, as a number of the Bruins beat writers would say and Cassidy would say. And once he gets the puck, it's moving in the right direction. And if he doesn't have an option, he has an escapability that like he and McAvoy are really, and Zboril sometimes really have in. Grzelcyk is particularly good at it along with McAvoy, and therefore you don't get stuck in your zone that long. And those are the things I think he did really well last night. And I think as he gets a little more confident, we'll see him jumping in and out a little bit more. And instead of just being effective, being truly impactful and really driving things. The other compliment I'll give to Grzelcyk is I think he elevates the players he plays with, and especially Brendan Carlo, who looked a little lost without him the last few weeks. Just couldn't quite find the right chemistry with a partner. Just didn't look like himself. And as soon as Grzelcyk comes back in the lineup, Carlo magically is like, oh yeah, what a good game, Brendan. And so I give Grzelcyk a ton of credit for that. And that fit, it just seems really strong for both of them.
Yeah, and that seems to be a thing with Brandon Carlo, is that when he plays with a partner that he's comfortable with and knows well, he's an extremely good defenseman and a really solid middle pair guy back there. But then as soon as that gets shaken up and he has to play with someone else, his game really dips, and it takes him a little bit to kind of get back into the swing of things. And we saw that he was so good with Torrey Krug next to him. He got so comfortable there, and they had such a great dynamic between them that they were a really, really good defense pair last season. And then he doesn't have Krug, obviously, this year, but he builds up that chemistry with Grzelcyk, and then Grzelcyk goes out with an injury. And you see Carlo's game dip without a guy next to him that he's comfortable with. And I think it's huge for Carlo to have Grzelcyk back because, he plays so much better when he has that comfortable guy next to him rather than somebody that he's not used to playing with.
Yeah, I think it speaks to his style a lot too, because the other player of the many that they paired him with, where he did pretty well with, it was Zboril. Clifton was fine, but it wasn't great, and I think he was playing with Moore even for a little bit there. And
that was not good.
No, not ideal. And he plays a game where he makes lots of these little bump passes, these little D-to-D passes, these quick little outlets. And that comes down to somebody who gets open for those, and you know he's going to be open for those. And then that player then is the one who really makes that next big transition pass. He's not a player that will really escape and make the big transition play or lug it up the ice. Whereas those other three names we mentioned, Krug, Grzelcyk, even Zboril, that's part of their game. So when he's paired with a guy like that, he's great at finding them and making that quick little, not outlet, but that quick little first pass to make the real first pass. And when he's not playing with guys like that, he's not as good. The other thing is he sort of is a steadier, more structured guy, and I think playing with guys who are a little more freelancy, like a Clifton and a Moore, he just has a harder time sorting things out, and he gets a little running around, and he's just so lanky, and he's a good skater, but he's not, he's not super agile like some other guys are, and so if he gets a little crossed up, it's hard to recover. So I think playing with Grzelcyk again, he's able to play his game nice and steady, make those quick little plays. It also allows him to feel confident getting up the ice a little more when he doesn't feel like he's carrying a pair, which is nice to see because that's a new little wrinkle to his game that is fun to watch and has been helpful.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a great point about him playing that specific structured style of game. And I think when you do, Carlo doesn't want to be freelancing. He doesn't want to be up there, kind of just on a whim the way that Connor Clifton plays, where he's just all over the place doing whatever he can to get the puck and get it up. And I think, having the right D pair really does help Carlo a lot. And I think Grzelcyk is a really good partner for him because they know how to play together. And that helps a ton. Now, are you concerned at all about Grzelcyk's health, because he has missed quite a few games this season, and it's been with a few different injuries? Like he's had an injury, then he'd come back for a game or two, and then he'd be out again, and then he'd come back and he'd be out again. Is that something concerning to you, or are you thinking he's going to be okay, hopefully, the rest of the way here?
Yeah, it's tough because you wonder how healthy he was when he came back the first time and then the second time, and even if it's not the same injury, how you kind of we're all men playing beer league, and how you protect a little growing twinge that you did stepping off the curb, and they're in the NHL, so if they're not at 100%, it's much more pronounced. And so I'm hopeful it's just a run of coincidence. He's an older guy now, which we forget. He's already, I believe, 27. And if he, at this point in his professional career, hasn't had that pattern or history, I know people are saying, oh, he's playing more minutes, he's playing against tougher competition. Like when he was playing bottom pair minutes against fourth line guys, the fourth line guy's job is to dump the puck in and run you. So if he could survive that, and he hasn't had an injury history, I'm hoping this is just all sort of coincidence. Had he missed, a season earlier in his career with something, and I might be a little more worried. But it seems like they took a little more time getting him back in the lineup this time, and hopefully that means he's coming back in much more full health than he did the first couple times where it seemed awful quick.
Yeah, for sure. And I certainly hope that he stays healthy the rest of the way, because the Bruins are a much better team when Matt Grzelcyk is in the lineup compared to when he's not. I think he's an important guy, a part of that D-core back there for sure. So hopefully he can keep it going and stay healthy the rest of the way here and help the Bruins get going into the playoffs. And another guy I want to talk about is Jack Studnicka, because Max from blackandgoldhockey.com, one of the writers here with us, did a really nice article the other day about Studnicka playing at center versus him playing on the wing. And I think, I agree that he's looked a lot better. At least I haven't looked at numbers or anything like that. Just watching the games and seeing the eye test, I think Studnicka looks a lot better at center than he does on the wing. And he's more just impactful. He's more involved in the play. And even when they are fully healthy and everyone's back, I would like to see Studnicka stay playing down the middle. Just wondering your thoughts on that, and do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. And it was a really good article by Max, because he did a really good job of talking about that eye test, the things you were observing, and then looking at the numbers to see if what we were observing ended up being true in terms of how it was impacting the game numerically. And both are true. What we're seeing is substantiated with this hard empirical evidence, which, sometimes numbers don't always tell the whole truth, but in this case, it really does feel like it is. I was kind of a little disappointed when the Bruins sent him down that they put him at wing. And I guess that was just to say, like, hey, if you're getting up this year, it's probably at wing, be ready.
Mm-hmm.
But he's a center.
Yeah.
His skill set speaks to center. Like, he really struggled at the start of the year on zone exits. You know, if you're not used to taking that pass on the wing, you played wing, didn't you, John?
Yes. Yes.
And if you're not used to taking that pass on the wing, it's kind of a little bit tough to handle with a center or a D bearing down on you and needing to make that quick little decision.
Especially like stuff coming off the boards. Like if you're not used to handling the puck when it comes right off the boards, that's a hard thing to learn. And if you're not doing that on a regular basis, it's definitely tough on a young player who's really just getting his start in the NHL.
Yeah, and you saw Frederick struggle with that a little bit early too, and he's actually improved a lot at it. But you could see that that's not what he's accustomed to. And the other thing is he works really well from the middle of the ice. Like when he was playing wing and he was getting pucks and he was trying really hard to get his feet moving, he was sort of blazing up the wing. You could just see he wasn't that comfortable and he wasn't quite sure what to do with it. When he's working from the middle of the ice and he's more above the play as opposed to like driving up ice with the play, you can just see his mind working more and his skill set more beneficial to that. You know, his skill set is less dynamic David Pasternak, break you down, or Craig Smith or Jake DeBrusk, you know, barrel down the wing, full speed ahead. It's more, let me survey the ice, let me try to make a play, and let me cut into lanes if and when I see them available. Maybe like it's maybe David Krejci light in that way. I don't think he quite has the puck on the stick talent the way Krejci does it at this point, at least. But that's more the style of game that he plays. It's sort of Krejci with less puck skill and more speed, if you try to make a comparison. Yep. And so that's his game, and that's what's made him successful. And so him trying to sort of imitate some of those other wingers, he just never really quite got going. And honestly, I don't think it would. Like, if you look at a Patrice Bergeron who had some success at wing early in his career, the way Bergeron plays, he's more capable of playing the wing, although obviously he's an elite center, so he's going to stay until the day he retires. But he had a skill set that could go to the wing more, and I just don't think Studnicka has that. And as well, when he is playing center, he's been really effective. He was definitely my favorite player to watch this past week. I thought he made a lot of little plays that helped drive play, you know, not necessarily things sort of like we were talking about Vaakanainen, not necessarily things that jump off the page to the fan watching a game, you know, seeing where the puck is going. But if you're sort of rewatching a little and you go, oh, wow, he made that little continuation play or that little play through the middle. And then every once in a while, he was sort of wowing with his little bit of skill, sort of that little extra patience in front or on a pass. And I really enjoyed watching him play, and I think that's the fit for him. The question is, you know, do you lose his skill in the lineup because you're too deep at center? Because it doesn't seem like Bruce Cassidy will ever take Sean Corrali out, nor does Nika necessarily, you know, fit on a fourth line. So, you know, but given, you know, just this past week, we thought he'd come out when Krejci was back, and Coyle goes on to the COVID-19 list, and you're saying you have him up and a guy who can step in and not miss too many beats.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think Studnicka looks a lot more comfortable at center, and it's obviously his natural position. And, you know, the more comfortable you are, the better you're going to play. And I think we've seen a lot better play out of him when he's down the middle than on the wing. And it's going to be interesting when everyone is healthy and everybody is back. You know, what is this lineup going to look like? Is he going to be able to stay down the middle or not? That's going to be something that the coaching staff figures out. But as a fan, as someone watching the games, I would like to see him stay there because I think he just looks significantly better as a center than he has at any point on the wing.
I think you're touching on a point like this idea of confidence. And, you know, I think you as fans, you watch these guys making, in Studnicka's case, hundreds of thousands, and most of the players on the ice cases, millions of dollars. And you forget, though, that they're humans and how important confidence is. And how much, like, when you wake up on your day and you're feeling good, you have a much more productive day. They're no different, right? In situations where they feel like they can succeed, and the chances are much higher. And that center is very true for that. I feel like the few shifts Frederick has played at center, he's also looked a little bit like a different player. Like, he's like, oh yeah, I know how to do this. You know, although he's really sorting wing out fairly well. So kudos to him for doing so in a pretty short time. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So Now we've obviously had so much to talk about in this episode. I want to take a look ahead a little bit because the Bruins do have a big week coming up. We were going through a few weeks there where they were having like 3-4 days off between games for various different reasons, but that is not the case anymore. The Bruins have another 4 games coming up between starting tomorrow through the next time I'll record next week's episode for this. And they've got Washington again on tomorrow night, Friday. They've got the Devils on Sunday. They have the Islanders on Tuesday, and then the Rangers on Thursday. So I just want to preview the week ahead a little bit here pretty quickly. Washington on Friday, we just saw them play a great game against the Capitals. Great game for both teams last night. Do you expect more of the same on Friday?
Yeah, I think so. I think both teams are going to dig in, and the Caps are going to want to prove it's no fluke, and the Bruins are going to want to get back, kind of get that third period back and get back in the win column. The one thing, the narrative I've seen on Twitter a lot is I think everyone's expecting these like massive fireworks after sort of the Frederick stuff and Ovechkin getting fined for giving him a little cup check, and Wilson kind of laughing at Frederick a bit. And just it was a bit of a chippy game at times. Mm-hmm. If it wasn't such a close game, you would have expected it to get chippier maybe. But I don't know. I think these are two teams who know how important the standing points are.
Yep.
So I'm expecting a pretty hard-fought game, but not some of the fireworks that I think people on Twitter are either expecting, or it feels like a lot of them are hoping for it.
Yeah.
But I'm excited. It was a great game. It's two good teams, and it'll be fun hockey.
Yeah, I think if there's going to be fireworks like that, I think the game would have to get one-sided, or it would have to happen like right at the beginning. It would have to be like first 5 minutes, they just go at it and get it over with, and then focus in for the rest of the game. Or if the game gets, 3-4 goal lead in one direction, you might see things get a little nasty, because the Caps and the Bruins do have a history just over the years of playing very physical, chippy games against each other. And it wouldn't be surprising if it went in that direction. But at the same time, the points are so important. And these teams have been playing extremely close games all season long. So unless something happens where it gets very one-sided, I don't think we're going to see that big explosion of fireworks. You might see a fight early in the game, just one here or that maybe, whether Wilson or maybe Brendan Dillon or Garnet Hathaway gets involved, someone like that for the Capitals. But again, I kind of agree with you. I think it's going to be a playoff style physical game, but we may not see that, parade to the penalty box that some people seem to be expecting. But I think it's going to be another great game for sure, because it usually is when the Capitals and the Bruins play each other. Then on Sunday, 5 p.m. start time, so not quite an afternoon game in the sense of it being like a noon or a 1 p.m. start, but a little bit early of a start time on Sunday against the Devils. That's going to be an interesting one, because New Jersey has kind of given the Bruins fits here a little bit this season. How do you think this one's going to go? And any thoughts on this matchup?
Yeah, I'm excited to watch it. Jersey has some fun players to watch. Like Jack Hughes has really started, we talked a little earlier about Vaakanainen and getting some man strength. Mm-hmm. Hughes isn't quite there yet, but he clearly was a boy. He was a frail, sort of light-framed 18-year-old, and now he's a little bit stronger 19-year-old, and he's fun to watch. And so are some of the other players. I can't pronounce the one guy's name, so I'm not gonna try. I wish I could remember it. And they have some vets that are exciting, like a Palmieri is fun to watch. He's always engaged, but they're fast. Even their vets, even Palmieri is quick. And the Bruins have had a really hard time with quick teams on the counterattack, and that's where the Devils have been able to put them on their heels. And so if they can sort that out as a team, maybe they should be able to put the Devils away. And if not, maybe not. The other person who I love watching is Mackenzie Blackwood. And so I'm a goalie guy, and actually I won't be able to watch that game in live time because I'll be running a goalie clinic. Yeah. But Blackwood is like, if I were to make a video or tell a kid or a parent or whomever to go watch the epitome of the modern NHL goaltender, it's Mackenzie Blackwood. Yep. He's so tall and lanky, but really strong. He's explosive side to side, but he tries not to use it unless he has to. He's aggressive without being over-aggressive. He doesn't overuse the blocking techniques and the post-integration, but he uses them when it's appropriate, and he stays on his feet when holds his edges longer when it's appropriate. And so as you can tell, this is clearly a topic I enjoy, and Blackwood is a treat for me to watch, and he's been great against the Bruins. So, while you might like to see a better result for the Bruins in terms of being a hockey fan,
Yeah.
you should enjoy that. You should enjoy seeing some of these really talented young guys and kind of accomplished vets and a great young goaltender play. But if they can manage their speed and play a more low event Bruins game, I think they'll have no problem kind of coming out with the win. But if they allow that to happen, they might be in trouble again.
Yeah. And a guy, I love Mackenzie Blackwood. He's one of my favorite young goalies in the league. And I think a lot of people kind of underrated him a little bit and didn't realize that he was this good, because last year the Devils were a pretty bad team and they didn't have a lot of support in front of them. But he showed signs of being a really good goalie last year. And now this year he's taken it to a whole other level where he's really looked awesome to start. And he's fun to watch. And Miles Wood is another guy that I really enjoy watching. Went to Boston College, so I remember watching him at BC back in the day. And he's really carved out a great niche for himself as kind of like the modern day tough guy somewhat in the NHL, where he's got blazing speed, he's got scoring touch, but he's a really big guy and he plays very physical as well. And he kind of plays that power forward role really well for the Devils. And he's another guy that I enjoy watching. So that should be a fun game on Sunday. Tuesday, they have the New York Islanders again. This team has just given the Bruins fits this year, where Boston really hasn't played well very much against them. Think the Islanders are going to keep that stranglehold over the Bruins, or do the Bruins finally get one here?
Yeah. At some point, you sort of regress to the mean, and so I think the Bruins will get one at some point. But you do wonder, sort of like the Flyers are to the Bruins are to the Islanders at this point, where there's almost like this, oh no, these guys again, like we're having such a good season except for against these guys. Like there was after their loss to the Islanders, someone tweeted, okay, against the Islanders, they might go 0-8, but they only had, I think, one regulation loss other than that beforehand. Mm-hmm. And so, but that's okay, because you'll only have 4 regulation losses the rest of the season against everybody else.
Yeah.
Obviously that's changed, but it was a funny observation.
Yep.
I think they get it back. I think the Bruins are well coached and they'll figure out those couple things that the Islanders have been doing to them. The Islanders clearly pre-scouted them and picked on those couple things that they thought they could exploit. So you expect a talented coaching staff to counter that and shore that up and pick on a couple things the Islanders don't do as well. And so I expect it to be a really good game. I'll predict a tie. I'll predict a shootout win for the Bruins.
Hey, there we go. Yeah.
Too much of a limb there.
That's funny. Boston could go 0-8 versus the Islanders, but go 8-0 against the Flyers, and they could cancel each other out there.
Can you imagine if all 3 are tied in the standings and then you go head to head, and then it's like that? Remember when you used to go to youth hockey tournaments and you'd have 3 teams that are 1-1-1?
Yep.
Beating each other and tied each other, and then you go to like goal differential and it's the same goal differential, and then it's like, who had the least penalty minutes? So
yeah.
So I'm hopeful that'd be amazing if in the NHL the division winner was decided by who had the least penalty minutes.
Yeah, some ridiculous tiebreaker for sure. But it'll be a big game on Tuesday against the Isles, and we'll see if Boston can finally get a win against that team. And then they close out the week as far as when I'll be recording again on Thursday against the New York Rangers. And Boston and the Rangers have played 4 times already this season. The Bruins have won 3 of the 4 games. I expect the Bruins to win this game. They should win this game, but Rangers have played them pretty tough for the most part, and they're very physical games. The Rangers and Bruins are really building that rivalry back up this season with them finally being in the same division again. Just quick thoughts on Thursday's matchup.
It's been fun to see actually like Lafreniere and Kakko like a little bit apart in the season from each other. Mm-hmm. In the first game, I noticed Kakko a bit, but not that much, and I barely noticed Lafreniere. And so it's been fun then in the next game to see them play much more significant roles and make plays. Yep. It's just fun seeing that, the future of the NHL kind of evolve and develop in such a short time span. But missing Panarin, which is so interesting because it's a story that blew up and people have kind of forgot about it, but we haven't heard from him since.
Yep.
And I really hope he comes back because he's so fun to watch. And that's such if everything we're hearing is true, that's such a sad story.
Yeah.
If everything been sort of potentially fabricated as true. That's also a really sad story. So it's just kind of a miserable story. But he's a huge hole in the Rangers lineup, and he's a huge hole in the NHL if he's absent for a while. So, but they're a team, even with Panarin, they're a team that they need to win 3 out of every 4 from and pick up those points and not sort of lose standings ground, because they have some exciting pieces, but they're not that good of a team top to bottom.
Yeah, I agree. The Rangers just aren't quite there yet. And the Bruins, obviously trying to be a cup contending team, they need to win games like that against the New York Rangers. And that's a team that they should be beating. So we'll see how Thursday goes, but a pretty busy week here coming up for the Bruins. Washington, New Jersey, the Islanders, and the Rangers all this week. It's going to be an exciting week of Bruins hockey for sure. And hopefully Boston ends up a little bit better than 1-2-1 with their record this week, and gets back with a few in the win column at least. But that's now going to bring us to our final segment of the show. And I know Leon said he's not really good with the whole betting thing. So I'll take this for you, though, if you want. Bruins Bet of the Week. This is something I started a few weeks ago, and quite honestly, I'm not too good at it either because I've only gotten one right so far. But it was this past week I had the under on the Rangers and Bruins Sunday afternoon game, and that game had 5 total goals, which was under 5.5, so I got that one. So finally getting a win on the win column. My bet of the week this week comes from also Sunday's game, this time against the New Jersey Devils. I just am taking the Bruins money line to win that game. The Devils will be on the second half of a back-to-back in that one. They have to play against the Rangers at home on Saturday and then travel to Boston to play against the Bruins on Sunday. Second game of back-to-backs are always tough. It's even worse when you have travel in between. So I really feel like the Bruins need to win that game. I know the Devils have given them trouble this year, but Boston doesn't have a game on Saturday. They're going to be rested. They're going to be waiting for New Jersey to get here. The Bruins really don't have an excuse to lose that game, in my opinion, and they should get it done. So my bet of the week is Bruins money line over the Devils just to win that game on Sunday. I'll just agree with that. Think Boston should get that one done.
Yeah, it seems like all the variables suggest that's a wise bet. So
Yeah.
I'll go with the variables on that one.
Perfect. All right. So that was our Bruins bet of the week. Bruins over the Devils money line on Sunday afternoon or evening, I guess, with the 5 p.m. start time. But everything's lining up for the Bruins to hopefully win that game, to say the least. But that's going to bring us to the end of episode 10 here, guys. Thank you all so much for watching. And Leon, thank you so much for being here and coming on the show. Really, really appreciate it. This was awesome.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. It's always fun talking hockey with you, John, and keep up not only this show, but the off-the-wall stuff and the play-by-play, and keep putting out that good stuff.
Hey, thank you very much. I certainly will. And again, guys, I just want to remind everyone the links down in the description. NHL, Boston Bruins, and NCAA college apparel, all available with the 3 links down in the description. And this show is brought to you by Black and Gold Productions. Tremendous group here at Black and Gold Productions, which Leon and I are both a part of. Leon writes and does the Bruins Breakdown podcast for Black and Gold, and blackandgoldhockey.com. It's where you can find all the work from our tremendous team of writers who are putting out awesome articles, like the one that Max wrote about Studnicka staying at center and how he's been better down the middle than playing on the wing. And great place to go for all kinds of Bruins content, written articles, tons of a big podcast network, tons of different podcasts to listen to. And that's all led by our leader, Mark Allred. So a huge thank you to Mark. This show would not be happening without him. So I want to give a big shout out to him as well. And everyone at the Black and Gold Productions team. It's been an awesome group to be a part of here for the past couple of months. And really, really excited to keep doing this show. And I want to thank all of you guys for watching and listening. That really, again, doesn't happen without an audience. So having everybody here watching the show, listening to the show when it gets posted is very, very much appreciated. And that is going to bring us to the end of episode 10, guys. I'll be back next week with a new guest for episode 11. It's going to be a lot of fun. You won't want to miss it. And for now, though, gonna sign off until next week. Thanks for watching, and talk to everybody soon.